Coogs House. All right, trying something a little different. Got a little bit of time between now and the next basketball game. So we took some questions of yours. Now let's get to them.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below this so that way we can get the latest on the Cougs to you each and every day, all year long. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. We are very, very close. We're knocking on the door of the 500 subscriber line. Remember, at 500 subscribers, our buddies at Sparkle are going to be helping us out with a little bit of a giveaway. So remember, when we get there, we're going to be giving away to someone who comments. So, hey, you got to hit subscribe so we get there. And B, you got to hit something on the comment, give us an upvote, make sure you get yourself entered that way. If you watch this whole video in which we're answering questions about the football program at this point on January 31st, please tell us if you like the more chewy or crunchy bacon. Now, what I will say is that I kind of broke down some questions I got in more mailbag kind of informal forms, but I liked how this went. So we may do this more formally later. But I got questions on new faces, and that'll be the first segment, looking at Eman Naghavi and Jalen Hunt, who just signed in the first segment. The second segment is going to look some at potential standouts next season. We obviously lost a lot of production on the football program, so we're going to look at some offensive standouts, I think, by my interpretation of the question next season. And that third segment is going to be all we know at this moment about the upcoming Big 12 Houston Cougar football schedule. But first, let's start off with a couple questions I got about Eman Naghavi. The first one was a little bit about recruiting and what kind of a recruiter he is. Second was a little bit more about what kind of stuff he does and is known for. I'm not going to reveal the name of the second one because I was a DM guy, and if you DM me, I assume you don't want it to be public. But the first guy was Juan, asked about what kind of recruiter he is. And Juan, I have to say, when I look at this, admittedly, he's been at mostly small programs. Tulane, Georgia Southern, Louisiana Monroe, McNeese, and then he was a positional assistant at Texas before that. I had to say that, like, it's kind of got to make sure you grade on a curve there, right? But I do think it's encouraging that in his stint at Georgia Southern, he was getting like 3-star kids to commit to Georgia Southern, and that's kind of out of character for them in a good way. Obviously, he was just at Tulane for the one season, so it's kind of hard to know like what he would have done with more time in an American Athletic Conference team. But then geographically, I do like that he seems to do a pretty good job of recruiting that Bellhorn from, I don't know, what do you want to call it, like Katy all the way over to the other side of closer to Louisiana and like all the closer to New Orleans and Louisiana, all the way across that. That's kind of his home base, it seems. And obviously, we talk about the big advantage Houston has going to the Big 12 is keeping Houston kids in Houston. So it's going to be really, really important. He is himself from Katy. I think that's probably part of the reason he feels so local. As far as getting to know him from the second question I got on this guy, he is the new O-line coach and run game coordinator. He replaces Brandon Jones, and that's obviously like kind of a bittersweet moment. Jones was the highest paid assistant coach in the American Athletic Conference and the highest paid positional coach, I believe, in at least Group of 5 football, if not Power 5 football as well. Highly, highly touted guy. And we moved on to get into Eman Naghavi, and I think the big criticism was Naghavi was like touted because he had 2 all-conference O-linemen last year at Tulane. And Houston also had 2 all-conference O-linemen. So, like, what's the big difference there? As far as looking at, like, his Tulane resume, which is just a year long, I think it's worth pointing out that Tulane, as a whole, I was at Tulane. If you look at, like, blown block percentage, which means, like, times that someone just flat out misses or whiffs when they're clearly trying to block somebody, and specifically, like, just gets out-athleted in the hole or whatever, Tulane has on recruiting boards, lesser athletes, right? And was in the top 4 in blown block percentage, meaning had the 4th lowest blown block percentage in the entire country, in entire Division I football. That implies good coaching to me. That implies that your athletes that are lesser athletes typically are under control and know what they're supposed to be doing and execute very well. Also worth pointing out that they were getting 5.1 yards per carry running the football this year. Obviously, we saw Tajay Spears in person, the running back there at Tulane, and how much that had to do with it. But scheme has something to do with it too, and technique has something to do with it too. I think both those things are really, really important. Conversely, Houston was getting over 10% of blown blocks. They're blowing more than 10% of blocks. That's more than twice as many blocks and block opportunities being blown, and was getting down closer to 4.5 yards per carry. So still having some success. Houston was a successful team running the football last year, but missed some blocks. And I think schematically we can look at what Houston did and know that some of those yards per carry are because you got defenses constantly in nickel packages because of how much they throw the football, right? And so I feel fairly strongly about the hire here in Eman Naghavi. No shade to the previous running game, but it looked like the running game is going to be boosted a lot, especially the running quarterback coming in and Donovan Smith from Texas Tech, right? Before he got to Tulane in his one season there and had his 2 all-conference all-linemen, he was at Georgia Southern for a season. He had 3 all-conference all-linemen there. He was at Louisiana Monroe for 4 years as the offensive coordinator. And if you take out the COVID year, because they had a lot of problems with COVID and smaller Division I football, obviously. They had a very successful offense during his time there. Very successful offense running the football and consistently averaging around 2 rushing touchdowns and around 5 yards per carry in his games at Louisiana Monroe. Now, when you factor in that Louisiana Monroe is constantly the punching bag for the bigger, they play Alabama as a tune-up game kind of teams. I think that's fairly impressive because that's going to drag their averages down, right? And on the whole, they kind of their offense played very, very well in the Sun Belt. Obviously, you can go listen to Locked On Sun Belt and hear more about them in the present tense, but in the past tense, back when Naghavi was the OC and coaching the O-line there, they had a really, really strong run game. And I think it's important to remember that's probably more what he's bringing to the table in his new role at U of H. Before that, he did spend some time at McNeese State. He was the O-line coach there, I guess, as recently as 2015 and 16. Before that, he was at Texas for 2 years at 2013 and 14. I guess if it's worth pointing out, UT Austin, he did coach under both Mac Brown and Charlie Strong. And so whatever you think about either one of them, the Chuck Strong staff clearly thought he's important enough to bring around as another assistant for another year, even though they changed head coaches. Before that, he had also been at McNeese State for his first stint. He played at McNeese State and was kind of working on it looked like his graduate degree while assistant coaching a couple different positions there. I think that on the whole, this signifies and implies a serious move in the direction to run the football. For all the great things that Patrick Paul did last year, for instance, on the offensive line, they were obviously a pass-happy team and a pass-happy offense that had Clayton Tune throwing the football a lot. Moving into both Lucas Coley and Donovan Smith next season, you got run-heavy quarterbacks. You also have a strong running back room, and I think they're going to be run to open up the pass kind of team next year because of all that. Obviously, we can see a little bit more of that in the spring ball kind of situations, in more spring practices situations, and then spring ball game. I also think it's worth pointing out that while there are a ton of receivers in uniform for U of H, both on campus and coming to campus this spring, I think the deal there will be the run game opens up a lot for them. And we know Dana likes to do both. There were times last year where, Stacey Sneed was getting 100 yards this game. Tajon Henry gets 100 yards that game. Like, he's had 100-yard rushers before. This is not as gaudy as the pass stats can be with Clayton Tune or in his first stint with Case Keenum. There are times where the more modern Dana Holgorsen wants to run the football, and I think this is kind of hinting at that's something they need to get more serious about going into the Big 12, because Big 12 is going to have bigger, stronger defensive fronts by and large, and so that's going to be really important. Speaking of bigger, larger, stronger defensive fronts, I would be remiss not to point out that there's another new face coming to the University of Houston. Jalen Hunt was high school class 2019, initially committed to Iowa, but played his college football to this point at Michigan State before committing in a transfer portal move to the University of Houston on Monday. Now, he played in just 9 games last season and had kind of in between stats. He played hurt in some other games as well. But I think the big thing here is that dude's 6'4", 320 and has been playing defensive end or 3 technique, and that's a giant. And that's the kind of giant that frankly gets Houston ready to go in the Big 12. There's a number of different transfer portal guys that will, shore up the front, obviously, for Houston. But I also think it's like, as you look at where Houston's going with their big guys. I think it looks like the recruits are mostly offensive guys, and the transfers are defensive guys coming to make an impact right away. Brandon Mack is coming in to be an edge guy. He's coming edge rusher from Ole Miss. David Igwogbu, he's coming from OU. He played linebacker there, but he's going to be an edge rusher for U of H. Cornerback Brian George coming from A&M. And now Jalen Hunt is going to be playing down in interior D-line. And then we talked before about Adari Halsey and Ish Harris coming as well. Both Halsey being a safety and Ish Harris being a linebacker. That's a lot of defensive new names to help fix defensive problems from a year ago that are transfers with D1 experience, and a lot of them Power 5 big-time D1 experience, right? And that's a good thing for Houston because, frankly, while I like some of the safeties they've pulled in recruiting in the 2023 class, it's hard to trust a freshman coming to Houston going to the Big 12 in your first year in the Big 12 next year, especially after we saw some of the more veteran guys give up to like SMU last year, right? And so I have to think that Jalen Hunt is just the latest in a like line of transfers that will be on the field right away, and so it's the name you need to get used to. I imagine statistically, because he's just a giant, he's a block absorber, right? He might not have the impact in watching him play some Michigan State snaps. Now that I've looked them up some, that like Brandon Mack, right, might have more. Brandon Mack might have more an impact in the stat book, or more have like sports from highlight plays, but those plays are sparked because Mack gets one-on-one coverage in the passing game, or one-on-one coverage like in pass blocking, because you got a double Jalen Hunt, right? And so that's kind of where I think this is going, and I'm really excited about him. And it's a big new face to get ready for. And speaking of big and new things to get ready for, I got to tell you guys about the newest partner we got here at Locked On. That is FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is the number one sports book in America. Pulling out my notes right, so I'm not missing the statistics, but we're really excited about them because they are the number one sportsbook in America, and we're your number one podcast for Houston Cougars each and every day. Find us every day. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's okay. They got a ton of great features to make sports betting fun and easy. If you download it right now, you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line, the point spread, to the who will score touchdown, everything all about the Super Bowl, all things you want. Now, I told you guys yesterday that if it stays under a 2-point spread and Philly is favored, I'm probably taking the Eagles because that's just so close, and I kind of feel like they're going to win the game. However, in looking at like more specific things, they've got Devontae Smith at plus 200 just to score an anytime touchdown. And I think that seems fairly high. The other thing, they had him at plus 180 to score a touchdown. The one I think that you got to do, though, after watching Kansas City play against Cincinnati with their two dynamic receivers, is they got Dallas Goedert at plus 200 to catch a touchdown, right? And after watching that game where you had T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, and Kansas City just doubled both of them and let Hunter Henry just like catch the ball all over the field, right? Like, I think that that's going to be kind of what happens with Dallas Goedert here. You're going to have people covering A.J. Brown, people covering Devontae Smith, and who's going to cover Dallas Goedert? He's going to get a touchdown. I'm saying take that at plus 200 as well. That's my pick, and I say you should pick it at FanDuel Sportsbook. Use FanDuel.com/locked-on to get up to $3,000 in a no-sweat bet. If your bet goes wrong, that's FanDuel.com/locked-on. All right. Now, I have to say that the other questions here all kind of blend together because they kind of fall in the same fashion. So I had one Facebook commenter when I posted this on Facebook ask about new faces. And I think the question was stemming, it sounded like mostly offense, about like who would see the field kind of in an impact role the same way Matthew Golden did as a freshman receiver last season. But he also asked about freshmen and sophomores. And so the cheating answer feels like Matthew Golden will also impact the field as a sophomore when you ask about freshmen and sophomores. Now, I also would point out that like Samuel Brown will also have the same kind of step up impact, kind of a, yes, Houston loses Tank Dell, and that means the defense probably has a little bit easier time covering multiple guys, but also means that like when we're dialing up pass plays, we're not theoretically looking for Tank the same kind of way. Like Houston in previous iterations with Clayton Tune and Tank Dell would run simple like, hey, we're just going to run Tank on a streak because no one on the field is as fast as him, right? And make them cover over the top easier. And then we'll come back down the underneath stuff to Peyton Sawyer or whatever, right? And then they run him a little out routes and say, hey, he's going to run away from you and just catch the ball out there and just see if he can boogie afterwards, right? And those are like called hitters to Tank Dell that worked. Houston scored a lot of points with very effective offense, but like kind of take away from the schematics you get when you kind of have a more even playing field. So I would see Matthew Golden and Sam Brown both having fairly successful sophomore campaigns. I think they're going to have really, really strong years. I also think it's worth pointing out that like the kind of run game I see coming from Houston with their movement, both in the coaching staff and with the quarterbacks, I think open up a lot of one-on-one coverage because you're going to see more traditional 3-4 and 4-3 fronts as opposed to nickel and dime packages, which means that whichever one of these guys is playing slot is probably going to get a linebacker on him. And that's a foot race we win 10 out of 10 times, right? So Matthew Golden, Sam Brown, I think a lot of people are hoping for Joseph Manjack to be an outside guy. We'll see how the spring goes. I think Mikael Harrison-Pilot as a true incoming freshman is going to be that kind of guy that just has to be on the field. He's the fourth highest ranked recruit to ever come to the University of Houston play football. He's listed as an athlete because he did everything at Temple. And I really, really think as a 6 foot, 190-pound route runner, like, I don't know if you want to put him at an outside guy and let him run underneath Matthew Golden running deep. I don't know if you want to have him an inside guy and have two true slots and have Manjack on the outside and maybe have Sam Brown rotating in at more of like he'll rotate in when tight end comes out kind of stuff. I don't know what we'll see more in the spring practice and spring game about that. I guess I just think this guy's feet and hands are too good to keep off the field. His footwork in and out of breaks, it's like he doesn't slow down. It's brilliant. He catches everything. Oh, and he can also like throw the thing, right? Like, and if you want to get him on a jet sweep, and we've seen, I mentioned the run game coordinator Naghavi. We've seen him run jet sweeps and stuff like that to get guys involved. I think Harrison-Pilot is too good an athlete to keep off of the field. It feels weird to call him a sleeper pick because he's a very, very talented wide receiver recruit, also a 4-star kid to come in. But I think the kid that kind of is getting left out some is Jonah Wilson. Jonah Wilson is from Duquesne High School, 6'2", 195. And I think the deal here is when I watch Jonah Wilson play high school, admittedly, I see a guy that like wins the blockouts, right? You think about like power forwards blocking out for rebounds, and down in the end zone, he might take out, someone like Matthew Golden, or because Golden's listed at, a little bit smaller. He might take those guys out of the game just because we can go like run a quick little, hitch route or stop or whatever, and he's just going to box out for a jump ball. And I think even as a freshman, he can contribute that for sure. And so he may end up with more touchdowns than people are initially thinking because those are really, really important in the red zone. I'm also assuming based on the way the question was worded, you were talking about offense, admittedly. If you're talking about defense, obviously I talked earlier about when I was talking about Jalen Hunt about how many of the defensive guys are actually transfers and thus not young guys. As far as like a young guy that is a freshman coming in to play defense, I'll be interested to see what Houston's D-line does with Justin Benton. Benton's a 6'1", 280-pound recruit from Georgia, which is unique. We don't get a whole lot of kids from Georgia typically, but Doug Belk has kind of dug a little hole there in getting some guys over this way. I do think what's interesting there is that we've seen Houston develop defensive linemen really quickly with Coach Early and stuff like that along the way. And so does Justin Benton become that kind of guy that maybe isn't ready for the first game of the season, but by mid-October is a guy that's in the constant rotation there? And does he make a big sack, later in the year? I guess if I'm picking a young defensive guy that's not a transfer, he'd be my pick as far as a guy to make an impact on the season this year. I do like Latrevian McCutcheon, the linebacker at LBJ in Austin. I think that's a harder position to transition into playing college football in, and he's a true freshman, right? Defensive line, it's like, hey, see ball, get ball, and like you're gonna be in the fight of your life to do it. Like that's a grown man in front of you. But the scheme can be a lot easier to pick up, and the pace of play is all you got to adjust to if you're a D lineman. Whereas linebackers got to read this, cover that, all kinds of stuff, right? I assume I'm answering that question correctly. So if that's not quite where you went with it, obviously comment below, let me know. Question about like how many scholarship players in the same vein kind of really see action. Obviously, it's going to be different program to program. You get 85 scholars, right? I think there's a reason NFL teams carry 53. The realistic idea of playing 85 guys is wild. I think you probably play. Let's do some quick math. You probably play, unless someone gets hurt. You don't want to get hurt. Knock, on wood. Probably play 6 linemen because one guy's got to sub in with someone like gets tired or whatever. You probably play 2 tight ends because we see a little bit 21 personnel. I'm assuming we play at least 3 running backs, 1 quarterback. We might play 2 at the start of the season. 4 to 7 receivers because you're going to rotate guys through. I think they're going to throw the ball around some. All of a sudden, you're very quickly up to, what is that, 10, 20 guys that rotate on offense because you got a 2 deep, some of that. And then defensively, I think you probably actually play closer to 24, 25 because you're going to rotate front 7 guys based on situation. So, like, 3rd and short, you get your heavier bodies in there, bigger, stronger guys. 3rd and 12, you probably have more pass rushing body types, and you got to have both in the rotation. So I imagine we're looking at closer to 45 to 50 guys playing a lot of snaps for Houston next season. And I think that's, again, different coach to coach. Some guys are doing different things. I know Alabama rotates a lot of the, we'll say, lesser named guys through fairly regularly. One of the crazy things about, like, the Georgia football program is that, like, their defensive front, it doesn't seem to matter who's in it. They're just going to get after it. And so they just rotate guys over and over and over again. And then some guys are schematically varied on offense where you run 21 personnel this set, 2 running backs, 1 tight end, fullback, H guy. And then the next set you run 10, 1 running back and 4 receivers, right? Like, and then sometimes you run empty. So Houston isn't quite that varied, although I do think you'll see multiple fronts. But I can see them playing more like 40 to 45 guys, fairly regular snaps. Because you got to rotate legs at a lot of spots. And suddenly, like, oh, Parker, that's 40 to 45 guys. Like, do we have 40 to 45 Big 12 guys? And I think we do. I think some are just freshmen. And so you're going to have times out there where freshman safety is there. You just hope it's in, like, the middle of the second quarter when one guy's catching his breath. And then if the game is still close, you're hoping to keep the games close and let your, transfer guy in that's a junior or whatever make a play down the stretch. And then you can hopefully grow from the experience and right? Suffice it to say that I imagine Houston is freely rotating guys throughout the roster next year and kind of using as a growth year as the first in Big 12. And if we can win like 7-8 games, power to us. First in Big 12, I don't think there's anything to sneeze at. And then hopefully continue to build off that momentum. I think Houston set it very well. The transfer portal works out very much in our favor. Whereas, like, when TCU jumped in the Big 12, what has that been, like 10 years ago now? 10, 11 years ago now? When TCU jumped in the Big 12, they didn't have the luxury of the transfer portal in the same way. NIL money didn't quite flow the same way. Houston is certainly seizing the moment with that. Our third segment, I'd like to jump into talking about what we know so far about the football schedule. So let's get to it in the third segment. In the football schedule, we found out on Monday, late afternoon, early evening, that the Big 12 schedule is finally going to get released on Tuesday. I guess it's getting released at 1 o'clock Central Time. So set your clocks. And if you listen to this afterwards, please don't completely leave the video. Go pull it up. Just like pull it up in another tab and just listen. Just pull up in another tab. Yeah, just like that. Perfect. I will say that there have been a few leaks to the schedule, and part of it is because someone in the TCU fan base found that TCU had actually posted their schedule and just leaked the whole thing, right? So suffice to say that you have a couple of games that you have to play, like Texas game late in the season, but Houston will play at UTSA, or will play UTSA, I should say, and they will play Rice. Those are the non-conference games that seem to be kind of in schedule for a while at this point. Hopefully it's a pair of wins. UTSA and Rice are both kind of in interesting spots in their own rights, but that's kind of where I see Houston getting a couple wins early in the season, kind of feel good about themselves going to Big 12 play. Big 12 play opens up per TCU schedule, which has been leaked, and I think it's fairly certain, with TCU on September 16th. TCU schedule has the game happening in Houston. It was unclear based on which leak you're looking at what stadium that will be in. There was the big Joseph Duarte report a few days ago about how, like, part of the holdup with the schedule for the entire conference was that teams that were coming to play Houston, some teams wanted to play in NRG, and some teams didn't want to go play at U of H at TDECU Stadium. And Houston's like, no, y'all going to come play us in Third Ward, right? It looks like this game is just listed as Houston, Texas, but it is listed as at Houston. So it's not listed as a neutral site game with TCU on the 16th. It is the clear first Big 12 game. It's so early in the season, frankly, that TCU has SMU the week after per their own schedule. Like some teams will be playing non-conference at that point in the season still. Interesting game to open the conference with in our first Big 12 game ever because this team was in the national championship a year ago. Obviously, a very different looking team. They're going to lose their own set of guys in the NFL draft and transfers in and transfers out and all that kind of stuff, right? But I will say that if you wanted a Big 12 test, that's it, right? That's the test right there. Now, with some Twitter talk back and forth, it looks like Duarte does have the Texas game where it looks like UT Austin is coming to Houston on October 21st, Saturday, October 21st. And I think the big discrepancy there was with their large fan base in the city of Houston, they wanted to play, it sounds like, if I'm reading now, Duarte does not mention Texas. It's totally me reading between the lines, right? So I don't want to act like if this is not good information, this is me reading between lines. It's not Duarte's reporting. But it looks like with Texas having so many fans in the Houston area, they kind of wanted to play at a, quote, neutral site stadium at NRG and fill it up, right? The same way that, like, A&M plays Arkansas and Jerry World kind of in the middle or whatever, right? And Houston was adamant, it sounds like, to get this game on campus at TDECU Stadium as a true home game, and power to administration for that. I think it sounds like the money was hedging towards taking NRG, and Houston said, no, this is an experience for our students, an experience for our football team and everything. And so I appreciate that. I think the other part of that coin that they're not going to admit is that when you went to go play at UT Austin the next year, there's nowhere else to play in Austin. So you're going to play on campus for them, right? But that's left out. But that game, it looks like, is October 21st. What I'm hoping to do is on Tuesday when the schedule hits live is quickly diagnose it and post a quick bonus episode about the schedule in full and kind of go through game by game with it quickly, first glance, like initial gut reaction looking at it. That said, that's assuming all things go off on time. I am, as I always open up with, Houston-born teacher and coach, but as you probably know by now, schools in Texas are canceling on Tuesday because it's really cold outside, and that tends to be what we do here. So I got a little more time for that. That I'm hoping to get out Tuesday afternoon. There'll also be an episode on Wednesday. We're hoping to have some recruit talk on that day. We might have a basketball recruit talk and then a separate later football recruit talk based on how National Signing Day goes, especially if there's any splashes in National Signing Day. More to come on that when we get some more things final down between now and Wednesday. Thursday, we got the Wichita State basketball games. We got to preview that Wednesday morning. And then Friday, we're going to wrap with the Wichita State game and talk about the weekend's game against Temple. We got a rematch against Temple. I don't know if you heard this. That game did not go our way the first time in basketball. So we got to make sure we are ready to do that. We're talking about all things Houston Cougars here at Locked On Cougs. You find me on Twitter. Talk about it as well at Painsworth512, Painsworth 512 on Twitter, Instagram, and all your social media handles. We'll be hitting you with Locked On Cougs each and every day, but we appreciate you making us your first listen of the day today. For a second listen, I'm going to recommend listening to Locked On Big 12. And we're talking about all things schedule as well, transfer portal kind of stuff over there as well. And that's the conference we're going to be in. So let's go make sure we check out Locked On Big 12 for your second listen today. Thank you so much for liking and subscribing, commenting down below. Give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you liked what you saw, or at least that you liked the Cougs. And remember, Locked On Cougs, proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Go Cougs.